All right, well, it looks like it's 12 o'clock, so we're not going to waste any time. I'm so glad that you all are here today. Welcome to the right place. This is A&M University's Writing Center. My name is Dr. Roper. I'm the Writing Center Director, and this is my grad student. I'll let her introduce herself. My name is Ariana. All right, so we are here today to talk about writing and just back to the basics, give you some input on how to get started and how to develop your ideas, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts of writing as well. We are also recording today's session, so you'll see us kind of moving as close to this device as we can so that it will pick up our voice and hopefully pick up everything that we have here. And all of our resources are available on our website, which you can access through the A&M University webpage, and we can direct you to it, a few clicks, and then you'll get to us. And these workshops will also be uploaded there if you want to look back at anything that we've discussed today. So real quick, I know that are all three of you from Dr. Jones's class, or just the two of you? Are you also here from that class? Okay, okay, great. Wonderful to have you. And your name?
Benjamin.
Benjamin?
Yes.
Wonderful to have you here. And your name? Kirby? Okay, wonderful to have you here as well. Marty?
Mario.
Oh, Mario, sorry. Okay, great. Okay, okay, fantastic. Well, it's great to have you guys here. We're going to jump right in. Well, before we do that, are there any particular things about writing that any of you struggles with in particular?
I guess kind of the difference when they, ABA format versus the million format.
Okay.
Changes courses.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's probably to me is like the biggest.
Right. Understandable. And we actually are going to have a specific workshop for APA and MLA in a couple of weeks, so I definitely invite you to come back for that. Anything else in particular that you struggle with when it comes to writing?
I guess getting started, I guess probably most people.
Yeah.
Just to get started.
Sure.
So, what paper, I guess, or assignment.
Yeah.
It's really just getting started.
Getting started.
That's like get over.
Yep.
Once you start, like writing.
Yeah, that's very true. Yes, yes, absolutely, very true. With anything that's a little bit challenging, the first step is always the hardest, right? And I think writing certainly is included in that. So first of all, I want to just establish off the top an understanding that writing is a process. And once we understand it as a process, we need to also understand that at any point in the process, you might have to go back or go forward. It's not linear, it's circular, right? So a lot of times we think that we're so busy thinking about that finished product that we don't think about the process that will get us to that finished product. And we think that as we're writing, we need to write in the order in which it will appear by the end. But understanding that writing is a recursive process will sort of free you from that and allow you to enter the process at any point where you are ready to begin. So that might mean that you are all over the place in those early drafts of your writing process. If you just have an idea, or you have the assignment, or you have some particular parts of the whole that you know you need to have, you may need to just begin there and see where that takes you and worry about how to order it in the way it should be by the end later. And so a lot of times just sort of freeing ourselves from that end product when we're at the beginning of the writing process can make a world of difference. Also, with that in mind, you need to give yourself then time to do the writing, right? So a lot of times people say, oh, I write best under pressure. The night before it's due is when I'm going to do my best work. But in actuality, that's one of the biggest myths about writing. We think we're doing our best work. We're under pressure because of it. We have adrenaline going and we're getting it done and we're just focused on the end product. But actually what we produce is not the best that we could have produced. It might get you by, but at some point or another you will find that it actually is not a good practice to have when it comes to writing. And particularly the more in-depth type of writing that you will be assigned, or projects that require research and things like that, those in particular are really dangerous to hold off to the last minute, because there's a lot of work that needs to go into it. So I really advise you to try to break the habit of waiting to the last minute so that you can allow yourself the full extent of your abilities by taking your time and getting through the process. Additionally, with any writing that you do, there are two things that you will always need to keep in mind, whether it's for a class or for something outside of school. There's always a purpose for which you are writing and an audience to whom you are writing. Even in your personal journals, right? There's a purpose for it and there's an audience, even if that audience is you. Those two things will dictate every choice that you make thereafter as you begin your writing process. Why am I doing this? Am I trying to inform, persuade, or entertain, or some combination of those, right? And who am I speaking to? What is the message that I'm trying to get to this audience? What information do they need in order for me to accomplish the purpose, which might be to inform or to persuade or to argue or what have you. And so those two things, primary things, will guide everything that you do thereafter. It will determine whether you say more or say less, whether you include certain information or exclude it, because your audience may already know. And you might have to think about that audience a little bit and anticipate or even do some research to see what information is it that this audience requires. Now for school, the challenge is that we have professors who will set us up sometimes with assignments, and they are the actual physical audience, but they might want you to think about a broader audience besides them as you write. And so you need to be mindful of that as well, because what students sometimes do is they go, oh, I'm writing this for my teacher and he or she knows it already, so I don't need to explain this point or that point. But the reality is academic writing might be directly to a professor who is an expert in this field, but the expectation is that you demonstrate a wider understanding, whether or not you believe he or she already knows. And so yes, you might actually have to say some things in that document that he or she already knows, but it's still expected because you're practicing the work that is done in that particular subject area. So if you keep these things in mind as you begin the writing process, I think you'll be off to a good start. And so one thing that you mentioned already is what we want to delve into first, and that is how to start, where to start, the hardest part. And we have a slide that shows you some options that you have in doing that. As I said before, you want to kind of free yourself at the beginning from this linear thinking, and start by figuring out what it is that you're doing. What is the subject that you're covering? And I think Ariana would like to show you how you might do that.
Okay, so clustering, you would start like, you have a basic topic, and this would be your main idea right here. And then as you go on, like you think of other topics, you can put them here in the other circles. And there's different forms of this web, but it also allows you to see like concrete what topics you want to cover in your paper. You can even branch out from these and have certain topics that you want to go in each paragraph, but it's all about like what you want.
The important thing with this is the idea of clustering is, see the arrows? The goal is to think about the relationship of the ideas. So if you start with your subject in the middle, give me an example of a topic you might write on. Pollution, that's a great one. So we might put pollution in that center circle. Okay, so what about pollution are we needing to sort of think about? Or what are some things that we think about when we hear that word, pollution?
Air
So there's
pollution.
air pollution, might be one. Causes of pollution. The consequences or results. Mm-hmm. And then what to do about it. Yep. Solution, action, yeah. And so if you continue with this, you know, we would begin with any one of these as the central topic, right? So if you were to draw some arrows off of air pollution specifically, what are some things about air pollution that might need to be talked about or thought about? Mm-hmm. So specific things that cause air pollution in particular, yeah. If we were to talk about causes or consequences, what things might we put off of either of these if we wanted to go that route? Well, chemical plants kind of connect to that as well. So we've got sort of a relationship between this one, and there's probably other causes of other types of pollution that we might.
Smog in the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would go
Right.
Right. So you got to think about it, right? What are these relationships? Should this go in the center, or should this be off of another one? And there's no necessarily right or wrong. It's kind of, this is what you would be doing in this part of the process, is figuring it out. What are the relationships between these different points? Yeah. Okay. So go ahead to the next. Another tool that you might use for sort of starting is free writing, and I'll let Ariana explain what is free writing.
Okay, so free writing is just basically you start with the topic and then you just write everything you can think about it. Like you just keep writing until it's done. So you can start out by putting the main concept at the top, and you just keep going until you write whatever comes to mind, and you don't stop, you don't erase anything unless it distracts you.
Right. So it's not, you don't edit yourself. You don't go back and go, oh, that's misspelled. You just kind of like free-flowing thoughts, everything that comes to your mind, whether it's a full sentence or a fragment, or, just go. Sometimes with free writing exercises, you might just set yourself a time limit. Like for 5 minutes, I'm just going to write everything that comes to my mind on this. And also sometimes with free writing, what they tell you is, even if you are getting off subject, just keep writing anyway. Like you don't stop writing until the buzzer goes off, right? So you might end up at some point going, and it's sunshine today, and I'm tired, and I really want to go home, so it may seem like a useless exercise, but you never know, just the work of doing that sort of free flow kind of gets you warmed up for the writing process. Now, brainstorming is one that I like, because you can brainstorm on your own, but you also can brainstorm with a group, and a lot of times that's better, right? Because it's really just about bouncing ideas off of other people, having a conversation, and just writing down whatever comes out of that. So it's similar to free writing in that you're just exploring the connections and differences and putting them down in a form that is not necessarily structured, but that gets you moving in the direction that you're trying to go. So I'll let Ariana talk about the outline. In fact, I need you to switch over here just to make sure that your voice is heard. But there are two types of outlines, and a lot of times we are taught this form, and we think that, oh, I have to do this first, which some people are able to do that. But we're going to talk about the difference between the traditional outline and the reverse outline and the use of each.
So the outline is just basically to organize your thoughts. So you can start with the topic sentence and then follow each step to just go through and go with what you're going to go through in your paper. It then demonstrates your main argument, which is usually your thesis, and then the points, like those can be the topic sentences each paragraph, and then the evidence that you'll have throughout the paper. Oh. An outline establishes the plan for your paper, right? So it shows the connection between each topic that you're going to talk about. And it also allows you to see if there's any holes in your argument, and it also checks the flow of your paper.
So that, the way it's set up, you know how an outline is set up with the bulleted list under each topic. It allows you that sort of linear view. Maybe after you've done a clustering of free writing, you kind of then put those in a particular order that would make sense for the flow of the paper.
So this is just like a basic outline. So even if you don't have your thesis yet, you could even go through and look at the topic and have a topic for each section, and that could actually help you create your thesis.
And you know, the nice thing about this is you have the blueprint for the paper. You can just say, okay, I gotta write this, and then next I'm gonna talk about this, and then next I'm gonna talk about this.
Okay, so the reverse outline. So with the reverse outline, you're looking at the paper that you already wrote. So this can be like your rough draft, and you've had somebody look over it, and then this is you actually looking over it again. So with the reverse outline, you can print out a copy of your paper, then you number each paragraph, and you also get a number sheet of paper. And then on that paper, you're gonna put the main idea of each paragraph on the paper. And if you can't figure out like what was the main idea in your paragraph, then that means you might want to revise the paragraph so you can see if that goes. And it checks for flow to see if your paper is flowing, to see if you might have any issues, and if you're being redundant on any topics, and if you missed any points. It also checks for organization of the topics.
So for some writers like us, we talked about this, we don't do well with the traditional outline, because I usually don't know at the beginning what I'm gonna talk about first, second, third, right? So usually do a little bit of that free flow of ideas and kind of it's a mess on all over the place, yes. And then I go back and read it and I go, oh, I said that already. And then I'll make an outline that kind of shows that I'm able to then manipulate what's there rather than trying to create something from my mind that's already in it. Okay, so what we have been talking about has to do with the writing process. And it's basically following for yourself this general rule, which is you will begin your process with the big picture stuff, thinking globally about what your main point will be and the supporting points that you will make in support of that main point. And so as you're writing, you want to think about those bigger issues first. And worry about the editing of grammar and punctuation last. Because what's the point of fixing that imperfect sentence if it's going to go away anyway? Because once you figure out what you mean to say, you don't need it anymore, right? So the idea of the global and local flow or process is that you approach the bigger picture, the bigger issue of the main point of this paper first, and then I think about how I want to organize it, as we just demonstrated with the outlines and so forth, and not hemming yourself up with the frustrating little details of grammar and punctuation until you have really a finished paper that you now need to kind of look at more closely. So we're going to go through, and please, if you have some particular, once we get to the point where we're ready to do the grammar and punctuation stuff, if you have particular ones that trip you up, let us know if we don't cover them, and we can try to talk about those as well. But we've put together some examples of specific common errors and mistakes in writing and when it comes to those local issues. So one of those is run-on sentences or fused sentences. And so Ariana's going to explain what we do about those.
Okay, so these are some pretty simple examples, but this is just for you to get a basic idea. So a few sentences, like when you have two sentences going together, you don't have any punctuation or any coordinating conjunction or anything of that nature. So my professor read my report. She said it was excellent. And you can tell that there's two different ideas going in there, but we don't have any punctuation.
So one point that we should review, by the way, is because we're making an assumption here that we all know what a sentence is, right? So what's a sentence, Ariana?
So a basic sentence has a subject and a verb. So you have your action, and then you have the person doing the action. That's the basic. Then you can add in prepositional phrases and all of that.
Right. Subject and a verb and forms a complete thought.
Yes.
So if we have two, that's part. If we have two subjects, verbs, and forming of a complete thought fused together, right? That's basically two independent clauses or two sentences that we join together and should. So my professor read my report is a complete sentence. And she said it was excellent. We have the subject, the verb, and it forms a complete thought. And so what we have there are two sentences that have been joined together.
Then a comma splice is also those two sentences being joined, but it's just simply a comma. You just put a comma there. You didn't add any extra word.
So conjunction.
Conjunction.
Right, so the comma is not a strong enough punctuation to join independent clauses. And so that's how you know it's a comma splice, because if you have two independent clauses, comma is not enough.
Okay, so here's how you fix them. You can use a period, a semicolon, a comma plus a coordinating conjunction, or a dependent word.
So this is important because we just said you can't use a comma, right? Unless it's connected with a coordinating conjunction. And so you want to be careful of that. I think that's usually what trips people up.
Okay, so with the period, you just simply splitting the two sentences. So in some cases, you might have a sentence where there's two different ideas, and you want to highlight those ideas by splitting them. So, and then a semicolon, it allows you to make that connection between the two sentences. So if you have one sentence that's leading to the other, then you use a semicolon to show that connection.
So it's important to understand that grammar is rhetorical, and the choices that you make about which thing to use is not just about which one is right, but which one accomplishes what you're trying to do in that sentence. What is the relationship of the ideas? Are they two separate things? Am I ending one point and beginning another? Then the period would be what you want. But if the two ideas are closely connected and I'm wanting to continue a thought, then a semicolon or the comma with the coordinating conjunction would be a better option because it shows that important relationship. The coordinating conjunctions, what are they? So these are they and none other. So fanboys is a great way to remember those, of course. And these are the only ones that can be joined to independent clauses, along with a comma. So you have that comma and one of these conjunctions, and then you're good. It sort of holds the same weight as a period or a semicolon. And we have some examples.
So my professor read my report and she said it was excellent. Then you have, I went on a cruise, so I became sick. So it's kind of also like how you want your paper to read. So maybe you said, but I became sick.
Right, it would change the meaning then, right? So,
yes.
Yeah, so that would determine what is it that you're trying to say, then that would determine which of those makes sense.
And then I think we have some more examples on the page, like if y'all. Okay, and then, so what do y'all think will go in this first sentence? Like what coordinating conjunction? Yeah.
Would you have cheese or bologna on your sandwich? I wanted to go to the beach, but Mary refused. Right. Why? Why but? What suggests that? Good. All right. I'm allergic to cats. I have 3 of them. I'm allergic, yet I have 3. Okay. Or but, yeah, it seems weird. I'm allergic, but in spite of the fact, yeah. I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat any meat. Not nor, I think. Nor do I. Oh, okay. Nor do I. Okay. Yes, I guess we can change the sentence a little bit. Okay.
And Thomas will be late to work. He has a dental appointment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that's like people don't usually use. Or
Right. You probably would say because, and then the comma wouldn't be necessary. Or right. It's preference, not necessarily wrong. Okay.
And then Jennifer does not like to swim. Okay.
But with the gate, right? No.
Does she enjoy cycling? So she doesn't like to swim. Yes.
Nor does she enjoy cycling. Oh, so it's an addition. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and then Jackson wanted to eat another piece of cake.
He was on a diet. Yes.
Yeah.
His butt.
All right. Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, I agree.
Okay, so when you a dependent word, it focuses on more than it focuses more on one part of the sentence than the other. So when I went on a cruise, I became seasick. Or while she doesn't eat meat, she likes to eat vegetables. She went to the grocery store, which was across town. That's actually using like a dependent word at the end of a sentence, which isn't normally seen.
So these are cues, these subordinate clause signals, such as when and while and which, indicate that one thing, one phrase is dependent on another. So if you had, when I went on a cruise by itself, or if there was a period or some in punctuation, you would know something was off, because when I went on a cruise had that dependent clause marker, when, which says there's information that needs to follow this phrase that will help to explain the point. And so that's when you would be able to identify a fragment, because these markers will always indicate a phrase that has to be attached to another to form a complete thought.
And now we're looking at fragment. So a fragment is an incomplete sentence or an incomplete thought. It lacks a verb or subject. And
Right,
then-
it's the opposite of a sentence, right?
So then you have my dog eating her dinner and because she enjoyed her dinner. That's a-
Now, these,
Because you take the because out, what her different. That's the word.
yes.
It's incomplete.
right, the because would be one of those dependent clause markers that says that something has to follow this phrase in order to make it complete.
Yes.
Right, so you need the rest of that in order for it to be a complete sentence. Exactly. And it's because it came at the beginning, which is what you pointed out, because you could say she enjoyed her dinner because it was great, and you'd have a complete sentence, right? So it's because she enjoyed her dinner that the because comes at the beginning and it makes it. Exactly.
Yes, that's good.
Exactly. That's how you know something's missing. That leaves you hanging.
Okay, to correct it's really
Go girl.
okay, so to correct the fragment, what's missing? You got my dog, what's missing from the fragment? Yes. So a verb or a linking verb. Then here are some linking verbs. So taste, feels, acts, stands. There's no action in this sentence. And that's the way to fix it. So a way to fix that sentence would be by adding action. So she eats her dinner. And then how can we correct this one just Harry's on? Like what would we add? What could we add?
Yeah, something like I feel maybe.
Okay. So Harry's son would be your subject, right? So what we're needing is the verb, what he did, or how he feels, or how he looks, any information that shows what it is that we're wanting to say about him.
Okay, so how do we correct this when she was eating her dinner? Well, not she. Eating her dinner. What is missing? Yes. She is eating her dinner. Okay, and then we're looking at this one. So ruin her dress. How could we correct that? But kind of
The dress. Like, see, I would change
just switch it up. Yeah.
Right. But changing it, that what you just changed makes the dress the subject, and the description of it follows. Yep.
Okay, and now we talked about what you just said, like because she enjoyed her dinner. So what's missing from this? We kind of talked about it already. So there's a subject and a verb, but it's not a complete thought because we have that dependent word in front.
So that's why it's important to remember that an independent clause has a subject and a verb and form the complete thought, because some fragments may have a subject and a verb, right? So it's important to make that distinction.
So we talked about adding the fragment to make a complete sentence. So my dog was excited because she enjoyed her dinner. So you add something onto it just to make sure that it is a complete sentence. And then you can just delete the word. We can delete the dependent word.
Yeah, rewording can definitely make, there's various ways to do it.
Okay. So while her parents were away, what's something we could do there?
Right.
It is an action.
Right.
Yeah.
It's some sort of
Still needs the
action.
subject and the verb that does actions.
Yeah.
Right. So this phrase becomes a modifier for some subject.
Or why her parents were away.
Right.
Yes.
Right. This depends again on the context and what the point is that you're wanting to make that would determine the choice.
So here are some simple sentences that you can just look at to see if there's a fragment. So you check if there's a verb, a subject, and if it's a dependent clause. Okay, so now subject-verb agreement. A sentence subject and verb must agree. So if it's singular, the subject is singular, the verb needs to be singular. If the verb is plural, then the subject needs to be plural. So a single subject involves a single item or person. So it's your dog or the bracelet. And then a plural is more than one, so boxes of chocolate, Girl Scouts.
I know there's a common mistake, and I think it's often just an oversight. We confuse in writing sometimes the plural with the possessive, right? So we want to make sure that when we're doing plurals, we're not swapping them with possessives, which would have that apostrophe, right? Before or after the S, depending on if it's a single plural noun.
So then there's some plural nouns that actually end in S's. Boxes, cars, envelopes, phones. And then the singulars, they also may end in S, so you have to add something extra on there. So like kisses and dress. And then some plural nouns are irregular, like children, oxen, occupied. And the singular form of those, trout and octopus and goose. So as I said before, singular verbs end with an S. So it's how you walk, walks, talks, feels. And so in most cases, plural verbs don't end with an S. So it's walk and talk and feel. And so something did you notice? So that nouns and verbs are often opposite when it comes to singular and plural endings. And the best trick to remember is that only one of them will end in an S in most cases. So Samantha runs, the geese fly. And then a single subject, these are just also some examples of a single subject with a singular verb. My dog plays, her hair blows in the wind, and then my dogs play, and the children paint at school. Okay, and then here's some tips. So the subject will never be a part of a prepositional phrase. So you can identify and eliminate prepositional phrases to make sure that your subject and verbs agree. So what do y'all think this will be? The new collection of books is or are ready for cataloging?
What's the subject? Collection, right? And that's where it gets tricky, right? Everything we've done thus far has been pretty simple, but it's when you have those prepositional phrases that can confuse you, especially when the word that's part of the phrase has that S on the end, and you think, oh, that's my subject, when it actually is a book collection.
Yeah. And then we have a chance of showers exist or exist. May exist.
Yes. The subject is chance.
Right. Each one of the students was or were ready to write a report.
Each one was.
Recent events in my life has or have left me confused.
Events have.
Have. And then an ancient hall of records resides or resides near this town. Yes. The items at the auction was or were of great value.
Items were.
And theories of the professor is or are interesting. So this is some extra information. So proper nouns are capitalized, the titles of people, books, magazines, and movies.
I am amazed at the things that I see capitalized in college papers. I think for some reason, when we think of capital letters, we think of emphasis rather than the rule of capitalization. So as you're writing a particular paper, just keep in mind that just because a word is important doesn't mean it needs to be capitalized. You want to think about the actual rule, which is names of people and the titles of books and publications. So, right. And I guess that's where it comes from.
It's
I'm
possible.
like, guys, clearly this is not a proper noun.
It's a text message. They've got it. Right.
So,
Their abbreviations and
yeah,
everything.
Yes.
yeah. So sometimes it helps us to review those rules that we've learned long ago.
About the
Exactly.
like you say, as opposed to semester.
Right.
Those are things that are really tricky.
Yes.
Yes.
It's true. It's true. And so what you have to think about is if it's the title or the name of something, then it would be capitalized. If it is one of many that's common, every semester we have workshops in the Writing Center, then semester wouldn't be a title in that use, right? So it's still kind of going back to what we know the rule to be and seeing how it applies in particular cases. But you're right, there are those ones that you're like, wait. Seasons are, they are,
But unless you say, springtime is the most important, that's lowercase.
Yes.
But then you say in the spring.
right,
Because it's the exact time.
right. Yep, that's one of those ones that you just need to know the rule for seasons. Because it's like, how are you gonna know?
Well, it's like the name. You're pointing
Yeah.
out a specific time frame.
Right,
General.
Yes.
and thus the proper versus common distinction. Also, there's another one, mom or dad. Like, I love my mom. I would lowercase it. But I say, hey, mom, I need you to do so-and-so. That would be capitalized. But I'm using mom as her name in that case. Whereas if I'm just talking about moms in general, it would be lowercase.
And then every sentence is a punctuation. Okay, and then colon, so they can introduce a list of items or a long direct quote, and they must follow an independent clause. So I needed several items from my trip, and then you list out what you need. So your passport, your suitcase, toothpaste, and then
Right, so whenever you're looking at a piece of writing and you see a colon, the tip is everything to the left must be a complete sentence. So you need to reword it if you have a phrase rather than.
and then semicolon. So as we looked at before, they join two complete sentences, or they can also separate a list of things that have commas within each unit. So it tells you like where you traveled, and you have like you traveled this place, but you also traveled because there's two.
Between. Yeah.
You need a semicolon to split them. So it wouldn't look like that you're going to Birmingham, Alabama,
Right.
New York City.
Right. To create distinct units that are in a series, you would use the semicolon in those instances. Or sometimes in writing, when you're combining some sentences also, you might have independent clauses that have commas there already. And so if you're joining them together using semicolon, which you need to do anyway, distinguishes from the commas that are used for the other purpose.
Okay, and then apostrophe. So they are using contractions, and they also show possession. So Sarah's dad, and then can't and don't. And also something about apostrophes in like higher ed writing. In some cases, your teachers don't want you to have them.
Right. They are usually a signal of more informal tone. So err on the side of avoiding contractions in academic writing unless you're writing for a professor who's okay with them.
And then commas. So they separate items in a series. They surround non-essential information in a sentence, like the name of a person being addressed. So his daughter Jasmine. So if you didn't have Jasmine's name, the sentence would still be fine. So his daughter Jasmine has a recital on Thursday.
Something that's important about non-essential information in a sentence is non-essential is not just if I took this out, the sentence would still be a sentence. It's if I took this out, would the meaning still be the same and the intended meaning?
Yes.
Because sometimes you might have something that you can take out and it'll still be a sentence, but it won't express the idea that was intended. In this case, to say his daughter has a recital doesn't change, the meaning doesn't change by taking out what her name was. So that would be considered a non-essential sort of interruption in the middle that would need to be set off with comma.
And they're used to separate the date from the month from the year and a town from a state. So May 2nd, and then Huntsville, Alabama.
And then commas follow these in a sentence, like if more
Yes.
information comes after.
Okay, question.
Those are the basics. So are there any other, you mentioned the capitalization one, are there any other little things that trip you up sometimes that we can maybe talk about? That you can think of, things that you tend to do maybe in your writing?
Sorry.
Okay, so what about that? What question?
An internet address. Just writing the word.
In text or on the reference page? In text?
Yeah,
So-
in both. And the text is, they're not all the same.
Right. So in a couple of weeks, we have another workshop on APA and MLA documentation where we'll go into all of that. But depending on which format you're following, APA or MLA, obviously there are specific ways that you need to cite those types of sources. I think that's what you're asking.
I know
And-
it's the MLA.
right,
And then now a lot more.
right. It depends on, so MLA is the humanities, is used in the humanities.
Yeah.
And so APA is the sciences, and that's where you're crossing into a different. Yes, and
Yeah.
there are those as well. So in our next workshop, when we talk about research and documentation, sort of the rule of thumb that we really want to emphasize is that again, it really comes back to the basics still, right? You're writing, you still follow the same process, you still have your purpose and your audience in mind. Your audience in this case is a social science or a science audience, so there's this expectation of how to document information that's being incorporated into that paper. However, you know, we will share with you specifics for each of those styles of documentation, but it's really not any more than following a recipe, right? So you really just would do the same work of writing, and we will talk about research writing in particular. And then it's just a matter of looking to see, okay, when it comes to this type of source, what information do I need to share with this audience so they know that this is a book versus a journal versus something I found on the internet. It's the documentation style is just how you signal to your audience the type of source that this is and how they can find it. But the process of writing and the incorporation of that information into the paper is really what should take priority. And after that, it's just sort of, okay, this is this type of source, finding it in the resource manual. Purdue OWL is my favorite, and looking at the information that needs to be plugged in to satisfy that particular expectation.
I'm working right now on a topic, and I have my objective because I'm working specifically right now on the literature review. And my question is, how many books do we really need? The minimum. Because I have like 20 books, and like, I don't know, it's enough, it's not enough.
Right. Really, the number of texts that you need to include in a lit review will vary depending on the subject of your research and how much has been done on that subject already. So the way that you know that you've exhausted the literature is when you're reading all these different sources that you find, and you're starting to see sort of the same idea repeated again. And when you typically in every field have individuals who are sort of prominent in that field. They are the researchers that others refer back to. And so you want to keep an eye on those as you do, when you find your first source, you want to go to their list of sources, and you want to check and see if you've read something from any of those. And as you read those, you want to look at their list of sources and see, are any of these same names popping up again? Have I at least browsed through some of those individuals that was cited in this work? And as you begin to sort of accumulate and recognize, you'll begin to see some of those patterns of the repetition of information, or the reference to similar sort of go-to individuals who have done the work in this particular area. And after a while, you'll begin to see that you've kind of reached the limits of the information that's already out there on that particular subject area. Yeah, so it's less about the number and more about the information.
You can also look at the dates to see what's like most recent, because if you're looking at past dates, they're already covered your subject matter. So you wouldn't really need to also go, because somebody might have used those sources like you said.
Although older things that were done in the past might need to be looked at, or at least be familiar, you might need to be familiar with them as a reference point, right? So those particular studies or research individuals who have done some prominent work in the field, you might need to be familiar with so that you can reference it and show that you have an awareness of that. Even if your primary sources that you're using for the current study are more recent, they often are building on things that occurred much earlier. Any other questions? I certainly invite you to come back to the research and documentation workshop. We'll delve into these particulars in that one. So, yes.
You can bring your lunch if you want to. You can eat in here.
No.
Oh, yes. Well, we scheduled it at lunchtime because we thought it would be a good break in the day when people were available, but one of those things, you can never get it right for everybody. So as I said earlier, we are recording this workshop right now. So if you ever can't make it, you can go to our website and watch the video replay of what we did in the workshop that we've done. You can also, if you are not able to get here, we do these on the Zoom app. And so you can actually request that we send you the link to the Zoom meeting that we are conducting right now and recording. And you can actually call in or listen in or watch from home or wherever you are right while we're doing it. And you can even communicate with us, through the Zoom app if you have questions that you need answered during the workshop as well. So we're trying to make this information accessible to you in every way that we can. We understand everybody's busy and you're not able to always physically be here. Correct. Yes. Mm-hmm.
What's the date for the next one?
It is in June 6th. Yes. 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 2 weeks from today. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Questions? Okay, well, great. Well, we thank you so much. We have, we want to pass those out for you. If you would just fill out a survey before you go to let us know how the information was helpful to you today, or other suggestions that you might have for workshops that we might do in the future. We'd appreciate it. It'll take you 2 minutes, I promise, and then you can be on your way.